Hello and welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett and today we're going to dive into creating our own web client. Now it's going to be tiny, but when you think about it, how many times when you install a web server do you check it with something like curl or even maybe W3M, which is fine. Why are we recreating the wheel? Well, the reason is, isn't it good to know just a little bit about what happens behind the scenes? So we're going to create ourselves a little Python client to be able to connect to a web server. Hello and welcome to the command line. We've got a couple of web servers that I've just very quickly installed and they have their own very simple custom web pages. But so often when we're testing these connections, we will use something like curl or even links or W3M from the command line just to check that these servers are up and running. And whilst I have no problem with that, it is also very easy to create your own HTTP client or at least a simple client to test the connection to the website. And that's what we're going to look at now, creating this in Python. Now I'm going to use the Vim text editor, but obviously you can use any editor that really works for you. So I'm going to use Vim and I'm going to call the file http.py. And again, we can hit the big enter key and we are ready to go. The way we're going to start, probably like most of these projects, is by importing some pre-written modules. These modules do all of the work for us. So we need the socket module for our networking and the sys module for our arguments. If we're putting multiple modules in, try to think about importing them in alphabetical order. Now, we're not getting weird on you here, but if you've got many imports, having them in alphabetical order is going to make it a lot easier to determine what is already imported. We're going to begin by creating a function, so we use the keyword def for that. But I can also see that my syntax highlighting is not working terribly well, so I'm just going to quickly go through and set bg equals dark. It's going to be able to make you read this just a little bit better, and we can go back into our insert and then carry on. We're going to call this function http_request. The name doesn't really matter, but think of a name that works for you. And we're going to take two parameters, the host that we want to connect to and the port that we want to connect to. We can indent our code, and then everything indented is going to belong to our HTTP request. As we continue inside of the function, we're setting up a variable called http_client, and that's going to be then made up from our socket import and the socket class. We need to pass a couple of parameters through to this, and we're going to be specifying that we are working with IP version 4, and we separate with a comma and then socket.sock_stream. This is indicating then that it's a TCP connection. We can continue, and of course now our HTTP client will have methods that are already built into it. So I can use the connect method, and of course I open up my parentheses, but also in here it looks a little weird as I open up another set of parentheses, but this is because I'm passing a tuple through to it. So the host and port. We close both parentheses off and we can then continue. We've now connected through to our HTTP server. We need to send some information now. So we can pull up our send method from our client. And as we open up our parentheses, the first thing we're going to do is just put B for bytes. So we're sending byte data through. We open up our quotes for our string, and we can then specify our get HTTP 1.1, so a normal HTTP request. And we can then specify a new line, so return a new line. And we can specify our host. Our host field, then we just put an extra space here, close off our quotes, and we're going to get our host as specifying then our host that we are connecting to. We can make sure that this is encoded properly. because this is then coming from our variable. So we want to make sure then that it is the same byte encoded as we're working with. And we can then set up another concatenation as we go through saying byte data and then just putting a couple of new lines at the end. So we're trying to imitate a browser here. We won't be interpreting the HTML tags, but we're going to be able to receive information that is sent back from our server. To receive our response, we can set up a variable, and we can go through and specify this variable is going to be populated from our HTTP client and receive. I'm going to set a receive buffer size of 4K. I won't be getting a lot back from my servers. They're very simple web pages. And we can go through then and make sure that we, as the operator, can see the response by printing it. So print our response. But again, in the same way as when we're sending information, we can go through and decode this and decode it into UTF-8. And that's it. We're pretty good with that. We have made our connection. We can go through now and make sure that we close our connection. Remember, this is TCP based, so it's expecting a response. So we can go through and close it. And we are done with our HTTP request function. So this is where all of the heavy lifting is concerned. But we need to then go through and set up a little bit of an if statement to make sure that this is run properly. We can make sure that this is run by testing for the name. If the name or the internal name is __ main, then we are executing this Python script as opposed to importing it. So it's a good way to make sure that Python is kept tidy and stop everything running when we import, if we ever do import this. We want to check our input parameters. So we're going to check that we have provided the correct amount of arguments. When we execute the script, we've got to specify the host we want to connect to and the port. So we're going to check that it is not equal to 3. If it's not equal to 3, then we haven't provided the 2 extra arguments. argv0 is our script name itself. So we can go through and print out a little usage statement that we run then this with Python 3. The name of the script. So we can go through and put http.py. I had to think there, what did I call the script? And then we need to provide the arguments of the host and the port that we want to connect to. With this, we can go through then and close off our quotes, close off our parentheses, and that really is our if statement done. We don't need to put anything else in there. So we can move back to the same level as the if and put in else. And we can continue. And with this, then we can specify our host variable is going to be made up of our argv and 1. So that's technically the second argument, but the first that we actually provide. And our port then is going to be sys.argv2. Remember, these indexed arrays will start on 0. So 0 is the name of the script, 1 is the host, and 2 is our port. We need to make sure the port is passed through as an integer. Everything that we read from our arguments is going to be text, so we can convert that through to an integer. And then we're ready to go through and run our HTTP _ request, passing through to it then the 2 requirements of our host and port. Now that's it. That's our work done. Now, I may have made mistakes. You never know. I might not have made mistakes. I haven't edited this, so we will go through and find out now, but running Python 3. But it's better to see the errors and the edits. As I go through and just run it as HTTP.py, I haven't provided the arguments, so we get the correct message coming up. Then when I go through and connect to my Ubuntu server on port 80, you can see I've misspelled socket as soccer. So I can go through then and Vim, even though it's right near the top, we can get used to using Vim and putting the line number in, so +5, and going back then through to my HTTPY, and then I can go through and correct soccer to socket. So one mistake. Any more mistakes? Well, let's give it a whirl, and we can save this, execute it again, and we've got response and dash rather than response and equals. So let's go through and correct this. This is on line 9. And we can then move down and set that up correctly. And then give that a whirl again. You can't really expect to get it correct in one go. As we go through now and execute it, drum roll, and we're still having problems on that same line, but we've moved across a little bit now. The warnings underneath our HTTP_client instance, and we forgot to call the method. So that should be HTTP_client.receive. So we can go back, look at that same line, move to the end of HTTP client. So that's our instance of our socket, and then just specify .recv. We're good to go with that. And then try again. Ooh, look at this. We're now getting a response, and we're getting then the details that the server is responding back to us, as well as the welcome page, which we can see with our header tags. So this is good. This is now working. Let's clear our screen and go back. And I've also got a web server on the local system, so controller and port 80. So you can see this is coming back as Fedora Linux and Apache 2.4.57. Whereas we go back to the Ubuntu one, we can see that's coming back as Ubuntu and Apache 2.4.41. So we can compare even the differences in the server and the Linux distribution that they are running on. But you can see this just becomes a very simple way and a relatively simple script where we can start understanding our TCP connections.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.